Yo people, welcome back to another video. Now, I was just thinking about the potential dark side of Mr. Miyagi, the secrets as they've called it, the fake ID, the robbery, the Chinese coin, the Sekai Taikai potential appearance. The guy from the boxing claimed that Miyagi fled America for Japan instead of Japan for America as we had been told originally. That would actually make sense as to how Mr. Miyagi managed to serve America during the Second World War back in the 40s. So that's one thing that has kind of been explained. Now, there's so much established law, allegedly, for Mr. Miyagi that doing the maths, doing all the probabilities and the possibilities for everything would just be a whole calculation, and you might have to include algebra and all sorts of things because we don't fully know the events. But believe me, I've tried, there's no point. So I'm just going to stick to the main things that we got shown. And one thing we do know is that he served in the World War for America. And if he was really born in 1918, which is what the fake ID said, then it means he was 21 when the war started and about 26 when the war ended, which makes a lot more sense than being born in 1925 and being 14 when the war started and 19 where the war ends. I think it's too unlikely for a kid to survive all of that. So I'm saying that I think his actual birth was 1918, so the fake ID may not actually be too fake. Also, there's always been the story about his wife. She died giving birth to the kid also passed away, and this happens allegedly during the World War, so he couldn't have been a father and married under the age of 18, which would be the outcome if he was actually born in 1925. So what I think has happened, I think he set up the boxing club with that random guy, which maybe they met in the military, they might have become friends during the war. And the alleged robbery he did was in 1947, then he fled to Japan. That's what we've been told in Cobra Kai Season 6. I'd say that maybe the robbery was him trying to make money after losing his wife, his kid, and maybe just having trauma from the World War. Maybe he was just in a bad place mentally, maybe things just weren't going for him. Maybe the boxing thing was also failing and he just had to do whatever it took to get the money, try turn his life around. Desperate times called for desperate measure. However, the more Miyagi thing to do would be that the friend did the robbery and Miyagi took the blame and then he fled as part of the act. Although I do prefer the first option because, like I said, desperate times, desperate measures, which ties into my next point. So let's say he went to Japan 1947, max 1948, then he was 29 to 30 years old again, if we assume that the 1918 birth year is correct. Again, I'm gonna ignore the in-betweens, whether he's been to Japan before or what has happened. I'm gonna leave that out. But from the objects that we've seen, it leaves the Sekai Taikai headband and the coin. I think the show has been gaslighting us with the Sekai Taikai headband. I think Mr. Miyagi was there, but not as a student. He was there as a sensei. I think Mr. Miyagi had made his own dojo and managed to get to the Sekai Taikai. However, I don't think it was with the kata and the peaceful style and what we know him for. I think his style was far more aggressive and more Cobra Kai in a way. All that anger he had, all the L's that he may have taken, the loss of his wife, the loss of his kid, the robbery, all that aggression, life being shit, and the desperate times, desperate measure thing that I mentioned before, maybe that was his way. Also, let's remember that Master Kim says that the Japanese had occupied his part of Korea, and in doing so, maybe some of the Japanese influences of the aggressive karate was kept by the Koreans and ultimately was an inspiration for Cobra Kai. So essentially, Mr. Miyagi's style started off being more Cobra Kai, which would feed to the life lesson of balance, and why Miyagi-Do is basically the opposite. Miyagi-Do was essentially what kept Miyagi in a happy place, and it was him correcting all his mistakes in karate and tying it into his life lessons. It would make a lot more sense as to how he was just untouchable in the films. He already knew the styles that he was up against. Anyways, as for the Sekai Taikai, I think the blood isn't from Miyagi. I think it was from one of his students. I believe Mr. Miyagi watched as one of his students, maybe his first ever student, who knows, beat the shit or killed another student. This may have just made Mr. Miyagi snap out of that whole aggressive, dark time that he had in his head. It made him feel ashamed, it made him quit teaching. I think this is why Mr. Miyagi didn't have a dojo later on, didn't want to train students, and most importantly, didn't want Daniel competing in any tournaments. Which I think only adds more value to his appearance in the first Karate Kid movie and what he must have been thinking as he's watching Daniel, and it adds another layer of plot to the tournament. So in a way, they've managed to expand Miyagi's story, which we've already seen, but without actually doing any resurrections or anything like that. Again, this is if the theory is true, if he had a previous student and all of that happened. As for the Chinese coin, I assume that after the incident at the Sekai Taikai, Miyagi fled to China and that's where he started changing his life. Maybe he met Han from the 2010 Karate Kid movie, and that's how they tie in Mr. Han and Daniel LaRusso for the new Karate Kid film. But I definitely do think that it's too much a coincidence that he's gone to China and not met the protagonist of one of the other films. I don't know. It's also a bit convenient, but we'll see. But I think China definitely has some important value to Mr. Miyagi. But yeah, ultimately with the whole Miyagi thing, I think they are trying to gaslight us and make us think that things were a lot darker than what they actually were. But yeah, my theories, shot in the dark. I don't know if any of these will even happen, but we'll wait and see. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. Do you have any theories? Let me know down below. Like the video as well while you're at it. Sub to the channel if you haven't already. It would be massively appreciated and it helps the channel massively with the algorithm and all of that stuff. Thank you for your time. Have a great rest of your day.